Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We love to dig into the strange and mysterious. And this time we're taking a deep dive into a world that's all around us, but still full of surprises. The world of sound. You guys sent in some incredible sources,
Mhm.
YouTube videos, articles, all about unexplained sounds from around the globe.
That's right. We're talking booming noises in the sky, weird hums that seem to come from nowhere, and even underwater sounds that people are comparing to get this a quacking duck.
A quacking duck, seriously, what is going on with that?
Well, that's what we're here to find out.
Right, exactly. We're on a mission to uncover the truth behind these mysterious sounds, separate fact from fiction, and hopefully leave you with some seriously mind-boggling questions to ponder.
I think it's safe to say we'll definitely uncover some mind-boggling stuff.
And
You know,
that's
when we talk about sound, we often think about what we hear, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah, it's easy to forget the sound is actually a physical phenomenon. It's all about vibrations traveling through different mediums like air, water, even the earth itself.
And those vibrations can travel incredible distances,
hmm
sometimes for thousands of miles. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really is. And speaking of traveling far, our sources mention how NOAA is using these underwater microphones called hydrophones to capture sounds in the ocean.
Oh yeah, hydrophones. They were originally designed to track submarines during the Cold War, but now they're giving us this incredible window into the underwater world.
It's like we're eavesdropping on an entire underwater symphony.
Exactly. We're hearing whale songs, the rumbles of earthquakes, even the sounds of icebergs breaking apart. And that's just scratching the surface. There's a whole universe of sound down there that we're just beginning to understand.
It's pretty humbling to realize how much is going on beneath the waves. But what's really fascinating to me? It's those sounds that only some people can hear. Like that weird hum in Taos, New Mexico.
Ah, the Taos hum, a
Yeah.
classic example of how sound perception can vary from person to person.
Our sources said that only about 2% of the population in Taos could actually hear it. But for those who could, it was this constant low-frequency hum that drove them crazy.
It's almost like an auditory ghost, haunting some people but completely invisible to others. It's thought that it might be due to something called selective auditory perception, where some people are just more attuned to certain frequencies than others.
It's like how some people can hear those high-pitched electronic noises that others can't even detect.
Exactly.
Uh,
And when it comes to the Taos hum, well, nobody really knows for sure what causes it.
it's one of those mysteries that just keeps on humming.
I like that. Keeps on humming. But speaking of strange sounds, let's get back to those NOAA recordings. We were talking about those earlier.
Right. There were some seriously weird ones in there, like the upsweep and the bloop.
Oh, yeah. The upsweep was the series of rising tones that scientists think might have been caused by underwater volcanic activity.
Pretty intense.
Right.
Right? And then you have the bloop, this ultra loud sound that was picked up in 1997. It was so loud that people thought it might be a giant sea monster.
I remember that. It was all over the news. Sea monster theories abound.
Yeah, but in the end, scientists determined that it was probably just a massive iceberg breaking apart.
Most likely. But even though that's the most plausible explanation, there's still no visual confirmation. So a tiny part of me still wonders if there might be something else lurking in the depths.
Okay, I see you. I'm right there with you. There's always room for a little mystery, right?
Right.
And then there's the slowdown, a sound that gradually decreases in frequency over 7 minutes.
The slowdown is a bit of an enigma. Scientists think it might be caused by an iceberg scraping along the ocean floor, but again, it's not confirmed.
Then let's not forget the bioduck, this rhythmic quacking sound that had scientists stumped for years.
Right, the bioduck, it sounds so strange. Like, why would a duck be in the middle of the ocean?
I know, it turns out it was actually the Antarctic minke whale.
Can you believe that those little quacking sounds were actually whale calls?
It's amazing what we can learn from listening to the ocean, but we've explored the depths now. Let's head up to the sky. Because apparently mysterious sounds aren't just confined to water.
You're talking about skyquakes, right? Those booming sounds that people hear coming from the sky.
Yeah, it's like a sonic boom, but with no visible source.
It's almost as if the sky itself is cracking.
Our sources mentioned that one explanation for skyquakes could be temperature inversions, where a layer of warm air traps cooler air below, causing sound to travel much farther than usual.
Exactly. It's like a natural amplifier for sounds that are happening far away. So an explosion or a sonic boom that happened miles away could suddenly sound like it's right overhead.
Wow, that's pretty wild. But temperature inversions don't explain all cases of skyquakes, do they?
Not at all. Some scientists think that meteors entering the atmosphere could be responsible for some of these booms, while others point to seismic activity. small tremors below the Earth's surface, creating sounds that travel up into the atmosphere.
So we've got sounds traveling through the earth, the water. What about space? Are there any weird sounds out there?
Well, that's where things get a little tricky. You see, sound can't travel through the vacuum of space in the way we're used to.
Because there's no air to carry those vibrations, right?
Exactly. But there are other ways for information to travel through space, like radio waves.
Okay, so we're not talking about sounds we can hear with our ears, but rather signals that we can pick up with our instruments.
Right. And that brings us to one of the most tantalizing mysteries in the search for extraterrestrial life, the wow signal.
Oh yeah, the wow signal, that's a classic. What makes it so special?
Well, back in 1977, astronomer Jerry Ammon was scanning radio signals from space when he detected a powerful narrow-band signal that lasted for 72 seconds. He was so stunned by the signal that he wrote "wow" on the printout.
Hence the name, the wow signal.
Exactly. And the signal was remarkable because it perfectly matched the frequency of the hydrogen line.
The hydrogen line?
It's the specific frequency at which neutral hydrogen atoms emit radio waves, and hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. So some scientists believe that if extraterrestrial civilizations were trying to contact us, they might use this frequency as a sort of universal hailing signal.
Like a cosmic beacon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And despite attempts to explain it away as natural phenomena or to human interference, the wow signal remains unexplained to this day.
A 72-second signal from the depths of space. A possible hello from another world. It doesn't get much more mind-boggling than that.
You're telling me it's enough to make you wonder what else is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
All right, so we've talked about sounds that can travel across oceans and from the depths of space. But what about sounds that are a bit closer to home? Like that mysterious hum that people have been reporting all over the world.
You're talking about the global hum, right? It's this persistent low-frequency sound that some people describe as a kind of droning or buzzing noise.
It's so strange. It's like this invisible sound that only some people can hear. And it's been reported in all sorts of places, from rural areas to big cities.
It's definitely a global phenomenon. And one of the things that makes the hum so fascinating is how it seems to affect people differently.
Our sources mention that in some cases, only a small percentage of people in a given area can actually hear the hum.
Like that case in Taos, New Mexico, where only about 2% of residents reported hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
But for those who can hear it, it can be incredibly disruptive.
Some people describe it as this constant, annoying noise that they can't escape. It can interfere with their sleep, their concentration, even their overall well-being.
It's almost like being haunted by a sound that nobody else can hear. And as you can imagine, that could be a pretty isolating experience.
Totally. So what are some of the theories about what's causing this global hum?
There are a lot of theories out there. Some scientists believe it could be a byproduct of industrial activity, like the combined noise of factories, power plants, and traffic generating low-frequency sound waves that we normally don't notice.
So it's like our modern world is creating this constant low-frequency hum that most of us are just tuning out. But for some people, their brains are wired a bit differently, and they're picking up on this subtle but persistent noise.
That's one possibility. Others have suggested that it could be related to natural phenomena like seismic activity or ocean waves.
So it could be the Earth itself humming.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the more out there theories like secret military experiments or even extraterrestrial activity.
Always got to have those alien theories, right?
It wouldn't be a deep dive into the unexplained without them. But regardless of the cause, the hum remains a fascinating mystery, and one that scientists are still trying to unravel.
Well, hopefully one day we'll get to the bottom of it. But for now, it's a reminder that there's still so much we don't know about the world around us. Even something as familiar as sound can hold its share of secrets.
That's for sure. And speaking of mysterious sounds, let's shift our focus from the hum to the boom. I'm talking about those strange sounds from the sky that people have been reporting for centuries.
You mean skyquakes? Those loud booming sounds that seem to come out of nowhere?
Skyquakes, exactly.
Yeah.
They've been reported all over the world, and they've been given all sorts of names, like the Seneca guns in the eastern United States or the Mistpoffers in Belgium and the Netherlands.
It's interesting how these unexplained sounds often get woven into local folklore and mythology.
People have always tried to make sense of the strange and unknown. And when you hear a loud boom coming from the sky with no obvious explanation, it's natural to start coming up with stories to explain it.
Our sources mention some historical accounts of skyquakes that were attributed to everything from supernatural beings to warring armies in the sky.
It's amazing how these stories can persist for centuries, passed down through generations. But what's really intriguing is that despite all the folklore and mythology surrounding skyquakes, there still isn't a definitive scientific explanation for what causes them.
So we've got all these stories, but no real answers.
Not exactly. There are some plausible theories out there. One of the most common explanations is temperature inversions.
We talked about those earlier, right? How they can amplify sound waves?
Right. So if there's a temperature inversion in the atmosphere, a sound that originated far away like an explosion or a sonic boom could be amplified and bent in such a way that it sounds like it's coming from directly overhead.
So it's like the atmosphere's playing tricks on our ears.
In a way, yes.
Oh.
But temperature inversions don't explain all cases of skyquakes.
So what else could be causing them?
Well, some scientists believe that meteors entering the atmosphere could create sonic booms that are perceived as skyquakes.
But wouldn't we see the meteors?
You'd think so. But it's possible that some meteors are small enough or enter the atmosphere at such a shallow angle that they don't create a visible trail.
So they could be sneaking in under the radar, so to speak.
Exactly. And then there's the theory that some skyquakes could be caused by seismic activity.
Seismic activity? You mean earthquakes?
Not necessarily full-blown earthquakes, but rather small tremors or shifts in the Earth's crust that generate low-frequency sound waves.
So these sound waves could travel up through the ground and into the atmosphere, creating those booming sounds that we hear as skyquakes.
That's the idea. It's a bit of a fringe theory, but it's not entirely implausible.
Well, it definitely adds another layer of mystery to the whole skyquake phenomenon.
It does. And it's a good reminder that the Earth is a dynamic and complex system. And there's still a lot that we don't know about how it works.
Well, one thing's for sure, those skyquakes are definitely keeping us on our toes. And speaking of sounds from above, we have to talk about something that's truly mesmerizing. The sounds that some people claim to hear during auroras.
Ah, yes, the auroral sounds. It's one of those topics that has been debated for centuries. Some people swear they can hear crackling, hissing, or even whooshing sounds during auroral displays.
I always thought auroras were silent light shows, but apparently that might not be the case.
Right. It's one of those things that has been dismissed as folklore or imagination for a long time. But there's actually some evidence to suggest that auroras might actually produce audible sounds.
Really? What kind of evidence?
Well, there have been a number of reports from people who have witnessed auroras and claim to have heard sounds at the same time. And some of these reports come from scientists and other credible observers.
So it's not just people hearing things.
Not at all. And in recent years, there have been a few studies that have attempted to record auroral sounds using sensitive microphones.
Did they find anything?
There have been some intriguing results. Some researchers believe that the sounds might be caused by electrical discharges in the upper atmosphere.
So it's like tiny little lightning strikes happening high above the ground.
That's one possibility. Others have suggested that the sounds might be related to geomagnetic disturbances caused by the interaction between the solar wind and the Earth's magnetic field.
So the auroras themselves might not be making the sounds, but rather the sounds are a byproduct of the same processes that create the auroras.
Exactly. And that could explain why the sounds are often described as crackling or hissing, because those are the kinds of sounds that you would expect from electrical discharges.
It's fascinating how something as beautiful and ethereal as an aurora could also have a sonic component.
It really is.
Yeah.
And just goes to show that there's still so much that we don't know about the universe and the amazing phenomena that it can produce.
Well, I'm definitely going to be listening a little more closely the next time I see an aurora. But for now, let's shift our focus from the subtle sounds of auroras to the most powerful sound ever recorded in human history.
You're talking about the eruption of Krakatoa, right?
The one and only. It was this massive volcanic eruption that occurred in 1883 in Indonesia. And the sound of the final explosion was so loud that it was heard over 3,000 miles away.
It's hard to even comprehend the sound that powerful. People who were close to the eruption reported that it sounded like a continuous roar of cannon fire.
And the shockwave from the explosion was so intense that it circled the globe 7 times.
It's incredible to think about the sheer power of that eruption. It's a testament to the raw forces that shape our planet.
Our sources mention that the sound of the Krakatoa eruption was estimated to have reached 310 decibels. That's louder than a jet engine taking off right next to you.
Way louder.
Yeah.
And to put that in perspective, the sound of a normal conversation is around 60 decibels. So Krakatoa was more than 5 times louder than that.
It's almost impossible to imagine a sound that intense, but the effects of the Krakatoa eruption went far beyond just the sound. The eruption triggered tsunamis that devastated coastal communities, and the ash and debris that were ejected into the atmosphere caused global temperatures to drop for several years.
It was a truly catastrophic event, and a stark reminder of the destructive power of nature.
But on a slightly lighter note, let's move on from the deafening roar of Krakatoa to something a little more mysterious and a lot more intriguing.
You're talking about the wow signal again, right?
I can't help myself. It's such a fascinating story. This brief but powerful signal from space that has captivated scientists and the public alike for
It's
decades.
like a cosmic riddle, a message from the stars that we're still trying to decipher.
So, refresh my memory. What exactly was the wow signal and why is it so special?
Well, back in 1977, astronomer Jerry Eman was using the Big Ear radio telescope in Ohio to search for signals from space. And on August 15th, he detected a strong narrowband radio signal that lasted for 72 seconds.
And the signal was coming from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius.
That's right. And what made the signal so intriguing was that it perfectly matched the frequency of the hydrogen line.
Which, as we discussed earlier, is the specific frequency at which neutral hydrogen atoms emit radio waves.
Exactly. And since hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, some scientists believe that extraterrestrial civilizations might use this frequency as a way to communicate with other intelligent beings.
So it's like a cosmic calling card?
In a way, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the wow signal was so strong and so clearly defined made it seem even more likely that it could be an artificial signal,
But the signal only lasted for 72 seconds, and it's never been detected again.
which is one of the biggest mysteries surrounding the wow signal. If it was an intentional signal from an alien civilization, why did they repeat it? Why did they try to contact us again?
Maybe they only wanted to say hello once.
Maybe. Or maybe there was some kind of technical glitch that prevented them from sending more signals.
Or maybe it wasn't an alien signal at all.
That's always a possibility. Some scientists have suggested that the wow signal could have been caused by a natural phenomenon like a comet or a pulsar.
But none of those explanations have been completely convincing.
Not yet. But the search for an explanation continues. And who knows, maybe one day we'll finally unravel the mystery of the wow signal and learn the truth about its origin.
Until then, it will remain one of the most tantalizing enigmas in the history of science. A signal from the stars that whispers of the possibility of other worlds and other beings out there in the vastness of space. We've explored sounds from space and the sky, but the ocean is full of mysteries too. That strange pinging sound that was heard in the Fury and Hecla Strait up in the Canadian Arctic back in 2016.
Oh yeah, the Fury and Hecla Strait ping. That one is pretty strange. It's this low-frequency sound that people described as a humming or a pinging, and it seems to be coming from the ocean floor.
It was weird, right? It was like something was down there tapping on the underside of the ice.
And it caused a lot of concern among the local Inuit communities because they rely on the ocean for their livelihood.
Our sources mentioned that hunters were reporting a decline in marine life in the area, and they were worried that the strange sound might be scaring the animals away.
It's understandable, right? If you're hearing this weird noise coming from the depths, you're going to be a little concerned about what's causing it.
So what were some of the theories about what was causing this pinging sound?
Well, there were a lot of theories floating around at the time. Some people thought it might be mining companies using sonar to map the sea floor.
Which wouldn't be too surprising given that there's a lot of mineral exploration going on in the Arctic.
Right. Others thought it might be military sonar or even submarines operating in the area.
But the Canadian military denied any involvement.
They did. And then there were the more out there theories, like the idea that it could be some kind of underwater communication system used by marine animals.
Or maybe even aliens trying to contact us from their underwater base.
Hey, you never know. But in the end, the source of the Fury and Hecla Strait ping was never definitively determined.
Another unsolved mystery of the deep. And you know what else is a mystery of the deep? That bioduck sound we were talking about earlier?
The bioduck. Oh, yeah. That one was a head-scratcher for a long time. It was this strange quacking sound that was picked up on underwater microphones all over the world.
It sounded like a duck, but nobody could figure out why a duck would be making noise in the middle of the ocean.
For years, it was this big mystery. And scientists came up with all sorts of explanations. Some thought it might be a new species of fish, or even a type of crustacean that made a quacking sound.
But it turned out to be something much simpler and a lot more adorable.
It was the Antarctic minke whale.
Can you believe that those little quacking sounds were actually whale calls?
It just goes to show you that sometimes the most bizarre sounds have the simplest explanations.
And it's a reminder that we still have so much to learn about the ocean and the creatures that live in it.
Speaking of creatures that make strange sounds, what about those moodus noises that have been reported in Connecticut for centuries?
Oh, yeah, those are some creepy sounds. People have described them as booming, groaning, and rumbling sounds that seem to be coming from the earth itself.
The moodus noises have been a part of local folklore for a long time. And there are all sorts of legends and stories about what causes them.
Our sources mention that some people believe the sounds are caused by a giant sea monster that lives in the Connecticut River.
I've heard that one too. But the most likely explanation is that the sounds are caused by seismic activity.
So basically tiny earthquakes.
Exactly. Connecticut isn't exactly known for its earthquakes, but there's an ancient fault line that runs through the area.
And even small movements along that fault line could produce sounds that would be audible at the surface.
Right, so it's not a sea monster, it's just the earth shifting and groaning beneath our feet.
Which is still pretty cool when you think about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one more sound mystery before we wrap things up.
All right, what do you have in mind?
I'm thinking about that strange underwater moan that was recorded by NOAA back in 1999. They called it Julia.
Oh yeah, Julia. That was a weird one. It was this long, drawn-out moaning sound that was picked up by hydrophones in the Pacific Ocean.
And it was really loud. It was detected by sensors that were thousands of miles apart.
It's definitely one of the more eerie sounds that NOAA has recorded. And like a lot of these underwater sounds, the exact cause of Julia is still a mystery.
Scientists have speculated that it could have been caused by an iceberg scraping along the ocean floor, or maybe even underwater volcanic activity.
But without any visual confirmation, it's hard to say for sure what caused it.
I guess that's just the nature of the deep sea. There's still so much that we don't know about it.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's safe to say that we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored sounds from the depths of space to the bottom of the ocean.
And we've learned that even in the 21st century, there are still plenty of sounds out there that we can't explain.
It's a humbling reminder that we don't know everything,
Right.
and that there's still so much out there to discover.
So keep your ears open, folks. You never know what you might hear.
And until next time, keep exploring the strange and wonderful world of sound.